I sat across from him, looking into the eyes of this insane, sane young man, and wondering why I was here. Mr. Murphy, do you know why I'm here today? I've been a therapist for nearly 15 years, and I like to think that I've seen a lot in that time. Every therapist has war stories. The clients you help and the situations that sprang from them create a rich tapestry that you can really only talk about with other therapists. I've worked with the police for the last 5 years, creating profiles and helping them get in the minds of serial killers and other undesirables. It's fascinating work, but this was the first time I'd ever been called to a case like this. I'd been called by the police to prove the guilt of a man found too insane to stand trial in the first place. You're here to prove that I'm competent enough to be put to death. He said this as though he were saying he wanted a Coke and a Big Mac for dinner that evening. I sat across from him, making notes on my steno pad as he rattled his chains and sat attached to a chair that had been welded to the ground. The staff clearly felt he was a danger to me, but I felt no less safe with him than I had with any other client. Patients rarely try to hurt their therapists, despite it being a bit of a trope. Patients usually see us as a surrogate father or a missing source of attention that they ultimately strive for. Less than 30% of patients ever try to hurt their doctor, and in my circle, it was less than 10% among therapists that I knew. I was about to become part of that minority, though I didn't know it yet. I turned on my tape recorder and sat it between us. Are you sane enough to be punished for your crimes, Mr. Murphy? The man sat accused of killing 7 young women before his breakdown in court. He sat across from me as placid as a mackerel. He looked very different from the mugshot that was in his file. His crew cut had been replaced with a short, bristly buzz cut, and his suit was now no better than pajamas and house slippers. On his contemporaries, these garments looked like the trappings of a mental defect, but on Murphy they appeared as natural as the pajamas he might wear at home. He wore them comfortably. They did not hang off of him as though they were only there to cover his modesty. Had I not heard the tapes from his trial, tapes found after the incident, I would have thought a great miscalculation had been made. If I were the judge and this man was in my courtroom, I would have probably set him loose again. As sane as you are, he stated, smiling a little as he said it. And yet, the doctors here are certain that you suffer from the same delusions you claimed to suffer from 8 months ago. If seeing things that I know are real is a delusion, then I guess I still do, yes. I made a note of that before turning back to him. You're referring to the smiling shadows? I asked, trying not to smile when I said it. Crazy people rarely take kindly to being mocked, even if it's just something insinuated from the tone of voice. If that's what you choose to call them, then yes, he answered haughtily. What do you call them, Mr. Murphy? He looked at me steadily, and I felt a little shiver run through me as he held eye contact. Those piercing blue eyes that held me had probably watched 7 women die. They call themselves the Gallery, and I can assure you that they are very real. When was the first time you saw this Gallery? At the trial. They came to mock me. The Gallery was present at your trial, I asked. No one was really aware of what had happened at the trial, except for Mr. Murphy and the bailiff who had come to remove him. They had been the only 2 survivors that day, 30 people having died in what the police were calling a gas leak, though it seemed to be a little too cleanly nipped up for me. This wasn't the first time Murphy had spoken of these smiling shadows, and maybe if they could break through the delusion, some new information on the perpetrator could be discovered. The Gallery was there, yes, but I was unaware of them until the very last. When my last victim stood up just as I was leaving the stand, that was the first time I became aware that the Gallery was there at all. The entire courtroom began to fill with their terrible laughter, and that was when I snapped. No one laughs at me. That last bitch could have told you that, but when she came up out of the crowd, came up laughing at me, I couldn't take it anymore. That was when you gave your confession of sorts, I asked. Yeah, I guess you could say that, he said begrudgingly. I had heard the tapes from the courtroom myself. He had gone from polite and articulate to a frothing berserker in the course of a few seconds. He admitted to everything. He admitted to killing her, told them how she laughed at him, and his ranting had hit a fever pitch as he was dragged from the courtroom. The judge had tried to call for order, but a soft titter of laughter could be heard from the stand just before the tape had abruptly gone off. Had the gas had some effect on Mr. Murphy's mental state, perhaps? Had he inhaled just enough to make him go off the rails as he was being led away? "You still don't believe that I saw them, though, do you?" he asked. I shrugged at him. "Are you seeing them now?" "I am, actually," he said, looking at the corner just over my shoulder. "In fact, this was their idea." "The gallery wants you to be sent to death row?" I asked skeptically. "As a matter of fact, they do, and so do I. They want me to be sent there so badly that they're willing to break their cardinal rule." "Oh? And what might that be?" "Apparently, they don't just appear to anyone," Mr. Murphy said. "They're very selective about who they choose to reveal themselves to. That time, though, is coming to an end. They're getting ready to show themselves to the whole world, but there are still places that are hard for them to get to. Old places. Places of power. Places where they gain more power. If I have to trade my life, a life outside of this nut house, then I will do so gladly." I nearly scoffed at him. "What leads you to believe that I will find you sane? With this sort of behavior you're displaying, I think this place might be the best spot for you. Because you're not a man of faith, are you, Doc? You're a man of facts. And there's no way that you could keep me here in good conscience if you knew they were real. In that highly unlikely situation, I suppose you're right," I said. "Well then, Doc, I guess I've just got one request." I looked up curiously with dread for what it was he meant to ask me. "Turn around and say hello." He was smiling as he pointed to the corner behind him, and I snorted a little laugh, deciding to play along with him. I turned my head slowly, expecting to see nothing more than an excuse to leave him in the puzzle factory for a good long time. I never guessed that I would see a reason to admit myself sitting in that corner. My steno pad fell to the ground, making a sharp clack as it did so. It was hunched in the corner, down on all fours and leering at me in a perverse way. Though the lights were on, it almost seemed to exist in a pool of murky light. Its smooth, dark head was devoid of eyes, its nostrils looking like they had been bored with a power tool. Its arms ended in long claws, its legs in a toadish splay of feet, but its teeth were the worst. Its grin was skinned back, no lips to cover those shiny white teeth, and they looked almost too big for its head. Though it never opened its jaws, I could hear it emitting a low chuckle, like a laugh track in a sitcom. The laughter was perverted, unclean, like the owner was just making the sound because it knew that people were supposed to like laughter. It sounded like the laughter of brains too mad to comprehend laughter properly. "Sounds like the laughter you hear in hell, don't it, Doc?" Murphy asked, and I jumped as I remembered that he was still there. "How? How did you do that?" I asked, unable to take my eyes off the creature. "Me? Oh no, you don't seem to understand. They live here. They like this place. They can rattle the chimes of anybody in here for as long as they need to, and get whatever it is they live off from us. Fortunately for me, they can't or won't do it. I won't work as food for them, so they decided to make a deal. They whisper to me at night, telling me what I have to do, and so I've done it. Now you know I'm not crazy. You know that I'm as sane as any other inmate in Stragview. You can't, in good conscience, leave me here with these normal crazy people. I might take advantage of them, or hurt them like I hurt those girls." He smiled as he said it. That smile told me all I needed to know about Murphy. He was as sane as any garden variety sociopath, and he belonged with his own kind. Still, I really didn't want to give him what he wanted. What if I tell them that you are insane, and that you have to... The shadowy thing was in my ear, a clawed finger sliding over my throat as it breathed oozy words into my unwilling ear. "Then we drive you to this place some night, and let him make you his next victim." Murphy shrugged, It's not as if I can't convince someone else to sign off on the paperwork. Why not save yourself a lot of trouble, eh, Doc? As I lay here in my bed, after having escaped that hellish place, I can't help but shake as I remember my weakness. He smiled at me as they let him out, thanking me for getting him out of there. He went away pretty meekly for a man going to the needle. It didn't change things, though. They may not be waiting for me in the dark corners of my room, but I can still see their grinning faces when I close my eyes. As I left, I saw them all around me, milling about, making their way between their charges. I can't unsee them, but I'm afraid they will haunt my mind forever. Maybe I'll stop seeing them once they drag me away to the nut house, but it sounds like my only respite may be at the end of a needle too.
You're still here. I thought you might be. Thanks for joining me for tonight's story. If your insatiable appetite for horror knows no bounds, might I suggest one of our playlists, or one of our previous stories in the archive? There should be one appearing at the end of the story any minute now. And of course, if you're not subscribed, why not go ahead and hit that subscribe button? Maybe hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of the spooky things that we do here. If you prefer your horror a little more analog, you can always pick up one of my books. There's a link below to my latest, and it'll take you to all the great things that I've posted on Amazon. For my book lovers in the audience, I always suggest coming on down to Patreon so you can become part of my ghostly reader tier and get a book anytime I write one, which is usually about twice a year. Speaking of my patrons, let's go ahead and thank them, shall we? Thanks to Unicorn Hollow for being our spooky ghost contributor. Thanks to Janet for being our spooky skeleton tier contributor. And thanks to Hi Stacy, Winter, Xaronan, Emily Coltsfoot, Stephanie Carrington, Marianne Schuler, Tyler Parker, and Jennifer Damron for being our ghostly reader tier contributors. Thanks, everyone. We just couldn't do the show without you. If you think you might like to support the show in a more monetary fashion, come on down to Patreon. I have many tiers. I think you'll find one that'll suit you best. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.